with the Berlin University Alliance and now supported by the Projekt Zukunft of the State Berlin. I'm Mariam. And we have a feedback. Studying here in the master's program, Design and Computation, and are moderating today's edition. Okay. For those of you who are new here, this is our event series here at New Practice, initiated together with the Berlin University Alliance and now supported by the Projekt Zukunft of the State Berlin. I'm Mariam. And we have a feedback. Studying here in the master's program, Design and Computation, and are moderating today's edition. Who is sick of hearing my voice?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
Today we welcome Mindaugas Gapševičius and Erik Stewart, who join us for a conversation on art science intersections, environmental impact, non-human creativity, and the humanization of technology. We will start with a short introduction round for each of our guests of 15 minutes, before going on to the main discussion, which we opened to everyone at the end of the talk. The loop we have before us will show us when each round is finished. And afterwards, we invite you all to continue the conversation at the bar.
Introducing our first speaker, we are happy to welcome Erik Stewart. Ian is a PhD candidate at the Max Delbrück Center for Molecular Medicine, MDC, in Berlin, which is a member of Helmholtz Association of German Research Centers. He researches how brains encode the body, and he was a founding member of EDGE Neuroscience Art community, which is a non-profit group of international artists, scientists, exploring intersections between art and neuroscience. Today, he works in science policy and advocacy, where he develops ideas merging politics, science, and technologies. As an artist, he also produced installations and audio artworks while studying in Sydney, London, and Berlin.
Okay, yeah, that's me. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Okay, so I guess the loop has started.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
my bad.
Okay, great. So this talk, I think, might be, it will be a bit philosophical, political, and a bit of a kind of a zoom out on why to do transdisciplinary work and break down these boundaries between disciplines, and then I will get into kind of the work that I've done and what I am speculating to be able to do in the future. But you know, what I'm currently doing is kind of lobbying work, so there's a lot of that thought that's gone into this talk. But I want to kind of address two things now. So why is transdisciplinary work important now in contemporary society? Sort of, you know, not for on the individual level, but the societal level. And maybe many of you have thoughts about this, so I'll be talking about my point of view, and maybe they're complementary. Maybe you've heard it before, and you can just put yourself, you know, for being so ahead of the curve. But you know, these are things that I started doing kind of 8 years ago, and in that time, it's been great to see actually it picked up more in institutional spaces and in, you know, big kind of things like this. You know, but at the time it was very kind of grassroots, I would say. And then I will talk about, you know, what is maybe possible in the future. So I kind of alluded it 8 years ago when I moved to Berlin. Actually, one of the first things that happened was Trump got elected in the U.S., which, you know, maybe how relevant is that for us in Berlin? Well, I made it pretty relevant, I guess, for my own life by joining the March for Science. And that's my friend Lindsay Peter Rogan there, who was doing science communication and designing games. And we both had this idea that actually, you know, it's not really so much knowledge or output of science that's really important to convey. It's kind of the method and the philosophy. And so we made these posters that are trying to just picture science as something that's really fundamental to human cognition and behavior. You know, that babies do science in some way, right? We had this idea that, you know, when you have this toy of trying to fit the brick in the right hole, you know, isn't that a scientific experiment? And then, you know, if we can kind of get this philosophy in ourselves that science is really fundamental, you know, and it becomes a kind of an ethical dictum. And that's really related to the ideas of Richard P. Feynman. So Richard Feynman, you probably know, is involved in the Los Alamos. You know, he turns up in the Oppenheimer film. But he, you know, and I've been reading his book, and he's really got these statements that, you know, it's about the method of science. It's about the value of a satisfactory philosophy of ignorance for society. The great progress that is the fruit of freedom of thought, to proclaim the value of this freedom, and to teach how doubt is not to be feared but welcomed and discussed, and to demand this freedom as our duty to all coming generations. That's our responsibility as scientists. And this is 1964, right? So leave room for doubt. You know, if I were in the habit of painting slogans on stuff, I'd paint that slogan. And we really thought, okay, how do you do this? How do you, 60 years and maybe it hasn't succeeded yet, and and clearly when an anti-science president gets elected, and when people are still claiming the Earth is flat, there's some kind of dissonance here between scientific ideas and public ideas. So we wanted to make the laboratory kind of experiential. We thought, kind of the problem actually with science communication is that science is really instrumentalized. So, you just get the output, you get the results, you get, scientists cured cancer, right? Even though they haven't, that's not even true, right? But you get those kind of snippets, that really present science as some kind of means to an end, the end being curing cancer or having cool robots or whatever. So what about the kind of process? So I made this sound piece where I recorded lab machinery and then interviewed scientists, and just wanted to create a kind of space where you engage on a sensory level with what it's like to be in a lab. And you can check that out on SoundCloud, but maybe you want to hold off because I'm kind of reworking it in collaboration with an artist, because I felt like it could be a bit more experiential even. But this idea of kind of experientiality, of really bringing the science practice and the tools and the aesthetics and environment to the people, is what I was doing a lot in EDGE Neuroscience Art Association. And it's what motivated me to be involved in the start and up until recently when I've moved on. And there I collaborated with artists. So here Ashley Middleton I collaborated with on this piece about EEG, and here I am with another volunteer affixing an EEG headset onto a person, and giving people then kind of the exposure to the technology. And this really came to a head for me when I did this, and there was a mother there with a child who had been being studied for epilepsy. And after putting on the headset and then experiencing, essentially this is a neurofeedback piece, right? So the EEG headset is reading brainwaves and then putting that through an algorithm that then modulates the projected images, which really doesn't come across very well in this photo. But there's this interactive element, and also understanding that the technology is like a real thing that you can kind of experience yourself. She told me afterwards that really gave her a much better sense of what her child is going through in these doctor and in these neurological examinations. And really that this isn't some kind of voodoo. This isn't about, the doctor's just doing some kind of magic. This is real technology that just exists and that's there and that was built by people and that is based upon scientific discoveries. And I think that realization, I still don't really understand in a way where the disconnect comes from, that people kind of imagine these sort of illusionary gaps between, what is kind of human and what we're kind of doing in different levels. Like science being something that's just, weird and over there. But this was our really attempt to kind of get this out of that lab and into people. And while doing that, actually, other interesting things happened. So we started doing these workshops where we take a neuroscientist, here's me, talking about my neuroscience, which is about proprioception. And proprioception I'll get to in a second, but it's actually, proprioception is the position, how you know the sense of your own body. So what we're doing in these images is actually kind of testing that out, that it's really easy, and we can all do it. You can close your eyes, and you can move your finger wherever you like, and this is what I do in all my popular science talks as well. And then at some point you just try to touch your own nose, right? And the way that you know where your finger is, that you can touch your own nose without sight, that's proprioception. And it works because your muscles have mechanosensors in it, your skin have mechanosensors in it, and that way you have an internal sense of body position. But what does that really, how does that turn into some kind of perception? You know, because the biology and the recordings of these neural signals predict kind of aspects of the sensory information that our brains derive proprioception from. So if I told you, for instance, that when you aren't moving, you aren't generating any neural information about your limb position, because the neurons in your muscles only fire when there's a stretch, a change. So if you're not moving a limb, does it exist for you in your own mind? Right? You know, funny question, but it has a phenomenological prediction that then we tested with an artist. So we worked together with dance instructors, and we did some exercises that they kind of do to sort of understand how context and shapes their own perception of their body. And amazingly, you really kind of experience it. If we did this exercise where you walk around the room and you only think about your right hand, and your right hand is leading you around the room. And then at some point, someone asks you the question of, where's your left hand? And there was like this click that I didn't even know I had a left hand. So there's this is where transdisciplinarity kind of goes beyond also performing some kind of function of like, oh wait, we need a new way to communicate science, and now actually driving this kind of science, this research, this knowledge into the next level. Maybe that's really obvious for many of you, but this for me was a huge moment. And so, other examples of how this kind of went forward, where do you really explore new things in a tangential way that you don't just like academically understand them, you really understand them yourself experientially, was in a collaboration with Miga, who's here. And he will talk about other projects, so I got to talk about this project. But he, worked with the designers to kind of weave DIY electronics into headwear, and the electronics could then perform the functions of EEG, which is measuring brain waves, and TCDS, which is stimulating electrically to kind of generate some sort of neural activity. And then if you link up those kind of systems across people, you get some kind of speculative transhumanist telepathy device, I like to kind of think. It's a way away even on the scientific level of understanding how that really works, like how can you encode a thought, and then how can you stimulate a thought? These are the questions that philosophically are unanswered in neurobiology, and that maybe we actually need to do some kind of experiential work to kind of get to those answers. So here we are looking at them together, and I shaved chunks off of my hair off to get a better signal, which is why I look so strange and sort of. But these kind of ideas that actually, when you looking at neurotechnology, that is a technological commercial thing, and looking at how it's being applied or can be applied in artistic projects or in sort of grassroots or DIY projects, that went into this paper that I wrote a section on, which is forthcoming, so there's no journal. But the idea of actually, if we need, back to the politics, if we need to understand what the need for regulation of neurotechnology is right now, then we need to also understand what the potentials of it are. And those potentials you find in sort of very explorative, speculative, artistic, experimental, DIY, biohacking spaces, because that's when people have done crazy stuff like implanted magnets into their hands, or tried to make a hat that can do telepathy. So I'm presenting it as a joke, and hopefully Miga's not mad that I'm simplifying his work that way. But this is for me a really concrete reason to do transdisciplinary work. Okay, so I was really thrilled to see then Miga kind of take this idea a step further and try to build interfaces between himself and his dog. And this is because now we're really talking about also functions that we can perform that go beyond what we could do with other means, like just talking. Because there's a real gap actually between humans and animals in terms of communicating, in terms of understanding. And this gap, to kind of go take a long arc here, I think fulfills a real philosophical need that's always been there, right? So if you've read Zhuangzi and the Tao of Nature, you know, there's a passage about how a man is throwing stones into a river and he's bothering the fish. And the sage comes by and he says, don't throw those stones because you're bothering the fish. And the guy's like, well, how do you know? How do you know what the fish like? How do you know it's bothering them? And he says, well, I've sat here on the riverbank and I've observed the fish. And I understand the fish through having seen them in their natural state, which is really the limit of what we've been able to do so far. Project through observation and speculation and idea agency upon an animal or an entity that we can't communicate with and just try to understand it from an observational point of view. And maybe we can do more if we kind of figure out how to interface on ways that don't require our own means of communication, but that require a new means of communication that is alien to us and to whatever we're trying to communicate with, and then that way we're both starting at scratch. And I think that this has a real, again, concrete, political, tangible need, because there's this question of animals that we actually cohabit space with. So city pigeons, I mean, I don't know actually if you can, what the definition of natural environment is for a city pigeon anymore. You know, they were domesticated hundreds of years ago to be carrier pigeons, and now they, you know, if you put a city pigeon in the forest, I don't know if it would even survive, right? So we have actually this political or social question right now of how to engage with a sort of animal thing that we've extracted from its sort of natural history and created a new natural history for, which is true of many, many things actually, which is maybe true of everything depending on your definition of natural, right? And it's becoming a political question here. So here's a Tagesspiegel article from October 24. They're currently debating in the Senate whether it's more humane for pigeons to shoot them, to give them birth control pills, or to swap their eggs out for fake eggs. All of which are crazy ideas, but you know, but the main argument that the Greens Party is making that we should do the more expensive, elaborate one, which is create specialized nesting areas that then the birds come and lay eggs in, so then we can swap the eggs out with fake eggs, is that this is more humane for the birds, which I don't even know what basis of evidence they're making that on, because they don't have one. And the only way you could really answer this question, I think, fundamentally, is with some kind of phenomenological projection. It's possible because there's a universality of the neural code. And I realize that the loop is finished, so I might save this for follow-up questions. But this is my neuroscientific work on the top, where I recorded the brain activity in mice. And you see the dots there are individual spikes of a neuron. And the curve is then the position of the limb as it moves. And experiments in monkeys 10 years ago pretty much have the same neural code to them. So there's a universality between us and other aspects of nature of animals, which is not surprising. We have an evolutionary shared history, and the brain essentially is the same thing that's evolved. But this is, you know, but if we want to convert this evidence or this premise into a way that we can really then solve these issues that become political, ethical, social issues that require also subjective experience of phenomenology, it requires transdisciplinary approaches, which at this moment still remain speculative. But I'll end there with this kind of quote again from the Tao, that, you know, typically to let understanding stop at what cannot be understood is a high attainment, which you would say is typically interpreted as, okay, let's, you know, not go beyond what we can really kind of empirically or definitively say, and let's stay humble with what we don't know. But I actually think that maybe we should interpret this as a field-specific knowledge. You know, you let scientific understanding stop at what cannot be scientifically understood, and then you need a different discipline and a different form of epistemology to go beyond that. Okay. That's it for me. You know, more neuroscientific detail I can definitely unpack, but I hope that this gave you an overview of why we should be transdisciplinary. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. I was really moved near the beginning of the talk by the story of the mother who got to perhaps understand her child better, or felt she could understand her child better. And I was thinking about the extent to which oftentimes I feel as if science feels as if it makes the concrete abstract, and you seem to be doing kind of the opposite. Science would be apple falls, I see apple fall, now let's turn it into an equation. That's like the way we normally think about it. And you're kind of taking a scientific principle and then applying it to real life. I'm wondering if there are like other places you want to take this, or like how to scale this, or if you've thought about that.
Yeah, so I think that it's a charming question, because it's getting also at what is a scientific approach or a method that's still really, how far can it take us? You know, the classical reductionism, especially when you are thinking about complex systems like biological systems, it has a limit, right? At some point, you know, if I want like a classical mechanistic understanding of a thing, like a mathematical model even, you know, there's like a need to know all of the information about that system. But then now it's kind of impossible to do that for many things that we want to have an understanding for, that we can operate on, like an individual human. You know, the entire information that's contained in their history that's now informing what their current state is, and therefore what their, you know, clinical needs are, or what their behavioral patterns are, these kind of things. That the information that you need to create that model is impossible to attain, because it's the information of the entire universe, or maybe just the information of their life, but that's still an entire lifetime's worth of information. So now we have to kind of redefine what we're trying to scientifically achieve, right? Maybe we can only come up with general abstract definitions of things like human behavior tends to follow these patterns, or, you know, if you get enough humans in a crowd, they'll do this because crowd dynamics are predictable because of some law of averaging. But then if what we're trying to do is actually go back to the subjective, I think that then we kind of run into really epistemological problems with the way that we do science and the way we appreciate science. Yeah, if you're asking me for a concrete example, maybe that's been included in there, but I think that we have to kind of shift a little bit what science is trying to do, and also what you can really claim that science gives you, because of this problem between the general and the single.
I have one more question before we move on, which is, there's a slight tension that I'd love to get into between the thing you started with, which is always doubt, or there should always be room for doubt, and this final, to let understanding stop at what cannot be understood as a high attainment. To what extent are we always supposed to leave doubt even when we think we have understood something? And to what extent will science always fail to know before we even take off on a spiritual, political, or other dimension?
Yeah, so I think that's important to think about in two aspects. You know, first of all, how can you maintain the flexibility to be challenged in ideas always, in every aspect? And Feynman talks a lot about this, you know, that actually if you at some point say that you're absolutely 100% certain of a thing, that's bad science. And that's not what you know, science is. You know, if new evidence turns up, of course you'd throw away all your theories if they, you know, if it's convincing. And we also have to, I think, maintain that same level of doubt when we talk about the application of science. You know, so I think part of the tension of what's creating this uncertainty about scientific values and you know, the space for people to claim that the earth is flat, I think is because of the authoritarian nature that science results or models have been applied to individual lives again. So that leaving room for doubt is kind of, has to be in, not only in the scientific method of gaining knowledge, but especially in again, kind of trying to apply it to an individual. And maybe the biggest problem of that is it currently in medical applications, I feel like. I think a lot of people are misunderstood by the clinical approach of diagnosis, but also a lot of people don't understand the clinical approach of diagnosis, you know, that this is a reactionary system, that if you go to a doctor and say, oh, I have a problem, you know, they are immediately in a mindset to kind of say, well, let's solve that problem, and if there's no problem, then get out of my office. You know, I mean, so that again, we have to include this element of, okay, it's not just about projecting the certainty of some kind of scientific result there, but also saying, well, maybe here are solutions, or maybe not.
Cool, thank you very much. We'll leave it there until the end of the discussion. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our second speaker, Mindaugas Gapševičius. Mindaugas delves into the intricate dynamics between non-human entities and human creativity while examining humanity's impact on the environment. He completed his MA studies at the Vilnius Academy of Arts in 1999, followed by earning an MPhil from Goldsmiths University of London in 2016, and defending his PhD thesis at Bauhaus University Weimar in 2022. He played a pivotal role in founding Institutio Media, Lithuania's premier media art platform, in 1998, and later co-founded Migrating Art Academies, a pan-European network supporting emerging artists. He co-established a community-based biolab, as well as AltLab, a hub for non-disciplinary research based in Vilnius, and launched the Center for Non-Machines Research. Welcome, Mindaugas.
Thank you. Thank you for that long introduction. Anyway, but I think it's very important to say that I'm an artist, right? And this kind of environment is a little bit different from what I usually do, right? But I still have kind of this experience in arts and sciences, and probably this is the right place for me. But perhaps we need to make this loop.
I'm so sorry. It's my first time on the machine.
So at least I know what is the time.
And it's going.
Okay, cool. So, somehow I wanted to always work with machines, computing machines, and my history started maybe like 25 years ago, and I started as an artist programming machines, right? And I think these machines kind of remain in all my thinking and all my artistic practice. And somehow, I consider always machines in what I do. So before I continue talking about what we read in the title, Center for Non-Machine Research, I quickly wanted to skim through slides so you know the context, what I'm talking about. I guess, the context is very clear and probably you are all aware of, so we just quickly skim through the slide so you understand it. It's not about AI, as we know, it's not machine learning, it's not translation programs, but different people call this AI differently. So I would say artificial intelligence 2.0, right? So I Googled quickly or checked on YouTube what is available, and I watched one movie which was, or not movie, kind of introduction to artificial intelligence 2.0. And these are like 10 slides, so I will skim through these slides very quickly so you just get an idea what it's all about. So this is about robots, emotions, so 2.0 can read emotions and show. This is very important, I think, biodigital convergence, and this is about interfaces between living organisms and machines. Kind of what Ray Kurzweil would say, maybe it is superhumanity, right? Something like this. programming, this is what we use every day, I think, already. Scientific methods, yeah. Ethics. Economics. Singularity, right. So these were the 10 slides from Artificial Intelligence 2.0. And I also, yeah, so this is a kind of state we are living already. Maybe we don't really notice, but or approaching pretty much. And yeah, if you would read, yeah, some like theoreticians in this field, you would see that they like Hales or Yuk Hui, so they say that it's already integrated, so we live together. But I also wanted to read one quote from Elon Musk. I don't want to advocate this person because this is his field, actually, this artificial intelligence 2.0, and I'm a little bit critical towards it, but it's his position next to these slides, so it's a kind of about the same. He was talking about this pretty recently in one of the conferences, Viva Tech, whatever it's called. So everyone will have access to as many services as they would like to. Maybe I still have already this. Yeah, I think it's this. Yeah. The question of life would be of meaning. I think that long term, in a benign scenario, any job that somebody does will be optional. If you want to do a job as a hobby, you can do a job, but otherwise AI and robots will provide any goods and services that you want. So the idea is that robots will be able to do anything what you want with AI 2.0. And the human ones, or like Elon Musk says, will be doing things for their pleasure, right? So no production, no real jobs, right? So we go to different field already. Karl Marx, you know, jobs and economy, and this is totally different where we go. So for the pleasure and for the meaningful work. So this is what Elon Musk says. And now if I start thinking, so what is the meaning if Elon Musk is producing all these machines and robots? So is it like my meaning, my meaningful life, or is it the one Elon wants to impose? So this is the question or the kind of background I'm talking about, or I'm trying to research. And while posing this question, so what is the meaning of the work or meaning of the life? I want to kind of step back a little bit from Elon Musk, and I try to start thinking about life itself. So what is it, the life? And here we come to the second part of my talk. So this was kind of short introduction. And this is about the meaning I want to talk about. And this is the Center for Non-Machine Research. I started building up. It's a scan, 3D scan of the house. So it looks a little bit trashy, but this is a scan, so a quick scan. This house, I call it Center for Non-Machine Research, is in Athens. And these are like two small houses. Having a backyard. You don't see here a backyard because of 3D scan. Trees were not scanned properly. But in the yard, there are different trees, including grapefruit tree, lemon tree, orange tree, and other ones. And on the roofs, the idea is to make a desert garden, and on the other roof I have a kind of a little bit bigger view, not to the backyard, but a little bit further. And this house is supposed to be for the artists, for friends, to come and do kind of research about the natural things. And I provide some tools. I will show some tools a little bit later, but also about this context, why Athens and why this house, which looks like a little bit abandoned. It is quite cool, actually. If you know Athens, it's all about concrete, right? But this house is a brick house, which is not that far away from Acropolis. So walking distance would be like 1 hour. And within this 1 hour, you can experience all the history of humanity. So that was also very important to start this project, to start thinking about humanity itself and life. What is life in the end? So yeah, so historical context very important, and this kind of house which brings some kind of living matter all around. So like trees, and if you know Athens, so we have hundreds of cats. So the cats are always running on the roof, in the yard, and all around. So they are just living next to humans. So now the questions, and I call it non-machines center. The non-machines is a kind of idea. It's a little bit tricky, of course, because I describe it as a artificial intelligence 2.0, let's say in different words. So we are kind of bound to digital world. And non-machines is kind of something different. But my idea of research would be maybe put into the line, if you would imagine the line where machines are and where like organisms are. So I have kind of those 4 positions: computing machines, then artificial intelligence, and humans influenced by machines, and non-machines. If I say humans influenced by machines, that would be kind of our life with, or our lives with cell phones and stuff like this, like computers, because we are kind of non-stop reading and thinking about what is given to us. So it's a small step to 2.0, I think, probably. So this house, and what I want to research is this area, gray area, let's say, between artificial intelligence and humans influenced by machines, in order to be a little bit critical towards what Elon Musk would say meaning. And I think to research the life, you need to kind of be able to use kind of tools, and these tools, what I provide are probably very simple ones, but they let to understand certain computations, let's say, or how they are done. There are tools nearby or next to this environment, let's say. And I just want to introduce one of those. I call it artificial jellyfish, which is a small computer, basically, computing machine, but they are running independently, let's say, from the grid, or off the grid, independently from electrical or electricity. Because we say we have small solar cells, and then we have a capacitor and a chip which is doing different things depending on what you want. You can do either photos, so you can sense environmental things, including temperature or whatever you want, whatever you would think of. And all this information is being uploaded then to the internet, so you could still see from our perspective, from the machine perspective, what is happening next to you. Yeah, so basically they are independently running machines, being able to calculate or deal with data. And this is another photo, which is supposed to be not for the underwater environments, the other ones for underwater environments. This one is for physical environment, like not water environment. And this is a photo of the jellyfish, which is in another kind of object or tool. I call it puddle garden. So this is where this jellyfish could be doing photos and see how plants react, for example, to supplied chemicals, or how plants react to different compounds, for example, salt or coffee or whatever you would think of. So the jellyfish would be doing photos and sent into the internet. This is a cascade garden, a similar kind of setup. And this is just environment without water to capture the physical environment around the jellyfish. And now I have a couple of photos here made by jellyfish. And this is a kind of collection of photos to start thinking what the machines do if we do not control them. So if you have a camera, you can still control the photos. But in this case, the jellyfish, the artificial jellyfish, is doing photos. And these photos are kind of different, I would say. It's not necessarily humane. So a couple of questions to think of. If the machines provide real information, what we want to have, or if machines provide not real information, or if it is illusion where we live. So kind of couple of open questions. And this is where I end up my talk.
Thank you very much. I love the jellyfish, and I also love that you say they take the photographs, that the jellyfish made the photograph. And I'm wondering how you think about agency for these creations as beings. Are they your beings, or are they their own beings? Or at what point do you end and they begin? Any answer you want to that?
Maybe I need to go home and to prepare this answer to this question, and could give you answer tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think it's very interesting in general. When I was listening for Ian's talk, he was talking about happy fish and pigeons who are here hanging around next to us. So we don't know them. We try to understand. So the idea is about any kind of agency. Could that be machine or like living? It does not matter any longer. I think in this kind of AI 2.0, all the agencies are exactly the same powerful. I think they are just different. I had a couple of more comments during the talk, but I didn't say. But my, let's say, dissertation was about just participation. And then after it, I was writing a couple of texts, and one of the texts was like this agency, this machine, is becoming rather a companion kind of companion species, which is should be approached exactly the same as humans, right, or any other organisms. And then now I think no, it's even not enough. So agency is not enough to approach to it like as a companion. We need to understand where we are. So this is a kind of my answer, unprepared one.
I would have a question about the jellyfish. What is the material around the device? And the question has also a second part, like what connections are there between your material of choice and the environment?
Yeah, so the jellyfish is plastic. And the project, I didn't talk about the project itself. It has its own context, the Center for Non-Machine Research. The project is about ecology, and I took on purpose plastic because the idea was to release this jellyfish around the world in all the oceans and to add more plastic onto the water in order to be able to start thinking of the plastic and other materials, trash, and impact onto ecology. So what does plastic do for the ecology or ecosystems rather, not ecology, let's say. Yeah, maybe we all know that fishes and birds, they all consume these plastics. But maybe it's cool, you know, it's nothing completely wrong because it's just part of the materiality we live in. But anyway, so it's plastic and electronics, which is poisonous for sure for all the living organisms. But still, it becomes a kind of living organism because it functions off-grid in a way, and is charged by solar panel. It does not have a battery, does not have a life cycle. So actually, it is there to become part of the environment. So it's plastic.
Thank you very much. So we've reached the end of today's session. Before we continue, do we have questions from the audience?
I was wondering about the jellyfish, if there is like a randomness where it takes photos, or is it something like, is there some influence over it, or is it just like, that was not very clear for me.
Very good question, and thanks for it. No, there is no randomness unless all the world is random. It depends on how you think of the world. But in this case, they have solar cells. They are charged. They are charging supercapacitor. And as soon as the capacitor is charged, it releases electricity, and then the chip boots and does the job. Takes photo, uploads into the internet, switches off, continuous loading.
Any more
questions? It needs light, sunlight.
I guess, yeah, I'm trying to form the question in my head, but so like I think you touched on like interfaces between like non-humans and humans, and at least I think I was curious to see actually the dog interface project that was presented, because I feel like this feels like a kind of an automata and not maybe an interface between the non-human and human. So I was curious because, with interfaces between these sort of like entities, the interface is always coming from like a sort of human perspective, and designing something is always going to leave out some complexities within non-human relationships and like communication and things like that. So I was just curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, the design aspect being inherently biased, certainly true. But I think that there's still a role there for honest to God observational science, and I think a lot of that, that bias and the bias also in observing non-human anythings, is really a central tenet of the way a lot of the science is done. So there's a lot of effort going into coming up with some, real approximation of what might be important. And I think that then you come up with a hypothesis, and then the only way to maybe test whether that's true, whether your model of how this entity behaves actually is a good understanding of it, is then to have some kind of interface or projection or something like that. But I'll let Miga talk more about the project itself.
Yeah, my idea was, at that time, I was also writing a article about that. So at that time I was thinking more of a agency or companion equal to humans. So not only our species like dogs, but also machines. They become also part of our ecosystem, let's say. But if you would think deeper, so you would think, and I think there was a slide also in Ian's presentation, but not so sure, that all the animals, so like brain systems, how they function, they are pretty much similar, right? So, that says that the humans are not necessarily that far away from other animals. So it depends on what kind of animals we would think. But having imagination of how other animals, similar animals, would react to human perspective could also give answers to humans themselves. Maybe what we do for other humans, it's also wrong. So we are pretty much similar, but we are kind of, when we are imposing our thoughts to other humans, maybe it's also wrong. So it is more like asking questions, not finding answers. I think it's not, it's still an artistic project, but it's not too much speculative. It is functioning. It had two types of interfaces, one kind of TDCS and EEG interface, and another one heartbeat rate interface. So kind of the dog would be definitely able to feel me remotely, and same with me, because the systems were functioning over the internet, or are functioning. So if my dog is at home and I'm at work, I still can feel my dog, and vice versa.
Any more questions?
I have a question for Ian. I was wondering, on the side with the universality of the neural code, this is based on motion of the animals, right? So they perform a certain motion, and the neural code is very similar. So we expect that, the same thing is happening for them. But the example you had with the pigeons, where now humans try to decide for the pigeon what would be the more humane thing to do, I guess, to either not let them be able to have children, or to steal the children, I guess, or to kill them altogether, would be more of an emotional question if we would ask that about humans, because if somebody would tell me either I will shoot you, or you will not be able to have children, or we will steal your child, then that would be a very emotional question for me. Did you do any research on how we can be able to maybe remodel emotions from animals, or how well we are able to translate our own emotions onto animals?
I mean, so in working with mice for this kind of research, there's a lot of real need to try to treat the mice humanely. I mean, maybe it should be micely. I think humane is still very anthropomorphic. But I mean, what can we do then to really understand? So the more you understand about the animal, I think the better of an approximation you can get. Because if you're able to get down to some kind of chemical, molecular, or neural coding level, and say, okay, what if I take regular blood tests before and after an intervention? Are there indicators in the blood of particular stress levels, or does the behavior change, or are there kind of flight responses? So this is inherently flawed. I'm sure you understand, right? Because at some point there's a hope that, okay, our observations that might correlate with an inner state are good enough to really be able to tell that inner state. And this is where I think also maybe biology is not really going to be able to find an answer, because when you're talking also about happiness, as a kind of state, putting a biological definition on that is already some kind of issue there. So this is kind of where I arrive at these conclusions that maybe these are things that we'll never know, but maybe these are things that we can try to sort of figure out once we're really progressing in this very speculative transdisciplinary area, and also realizing projects and gaining knowledge that's not just mechanistic and empirical, but also experiential. But I think it's possible on some level. I think these philosophical concerns are one thing, but maybe I'll just, to convince you that biology is really transferable, quickly tell you about this, a prosthetic that was designed by Sleeman Bensmeyer in Chicago, where they managed to restore a sense of touch to humans in an artificial prosthetic of the hand using data recorded from nerves in monkeys. So the nerve activity data from monkeys recordings that were invasive, that you couldn't do in humans, was informative to create sensation in humans. So there is some kind of, I am inherently a materialist in that sense, right? That there's a physical basis for cognition and emotion and all these kind of things, and that means that there's going to be some level at which you can record and maybe manipulate these things.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, this is going to be very broad, I guess, but like this, what you said was with this idea that more or less like when we move something, it's more about the energy of like a stretch or something comes across, and that's how we know that we actually move. Which I heard before, but I didn't really understand in a sense, because I was like, okay, but how can we then know that we are actually being or something? And that's like, maybe you can go a little bit further in this explanation, because I'm quite interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's wild. If anyone's been in a sensory deprivation tank, maybe this is a familiar feeling to you. I thought that I was just like a face that was floating in a pool, but at the same time, we have some kind of fixed model of a body, and there's also a sense of what is not your own body. But I think that there's two big mysteries here. First of all, how can you really experience things that are your body that aren't your body? Or how can your sense of your own body change? So there's experiments where people go just into VR. People put participants in VR. I remember forget the lab, which is shameful, but this is in Sweden. And then in VR, you're made to think that you're taller, and then after the VR session, you think that you are taller, and you wonder why you're short. How is that possible in one side, but on the other side, when you have phantom limb pain, you're experiencing a sensation of something that isn't there, that's no longer there? This is a deeply complicated neuroscientific question, and we're just starting to scratch this. So if you want to read a review on it, that's very much neurobiological. Jolien Denouge and Paul Marasco, I think, wrote a review recently on which, you know, they just get into how are we going to understand this, because looking at how information flows around the brain, and it's one of these things that becomes wildly complicated very quickly. So that doesn't answer your question, I think, but there's no answer yet. Yeah.
I missed partially your answers as I was trying to frame the question I had in mind, but it is with regards to how, Ian, you started with this political and philosophical wave, and I want to kind of weave things back to that. What I'm curious about is the legitimacy of other ways of knowing than science. Could you expand on that a bit in terms of informing policy making, in terms of change making, and how does, in your choice of wording, how does transdisciplinary work weave into that? How does that affect perhaps the trustworthiness or the legitimacy of other ways of knowing?
Sure. So I think that the biggest kind of flaw or danger of really making everything, you know, so I started the talk saying throwing out this term of an evidence-based society, right? And that's actually kind of problematic, because, you know, you sort of think, okay, if you have, you know, you need evidence to make any decision, is sort of the opposite of that argument, which actually many decisions you would make just on, you know, more kind of human considerations or sociological, or you know, also what's the question of evidence here? We're talking about hard sciences versus soft sciences. You know, maybe actually I kind of want to wind that back and say what the real thing that we want to try to do here is just explain where the knowledge comes from and what the decision is based upon. And if, you know, there is a firm scientific mechanistic understanding of something like climate change, you know, then sure, that evidence should be present and decisions should be made on it. And then in other cases where the evidence is not so mechanistic and hard sciencey, then also just talk about where that knowledge came from. And, you know, when you are, so I guess when you ask about how the value of knowledge politically, I'd say actually what's really valuable politically is just talking about the process. But, you know, I think actually I would ask Miga the question of, you know, how can you know things that aren't scientifically measured, or what's the value of these kind of things? Because I feel like your work is about asking questions that then lead to further questions and then lead to kind of thinking about a topic.
I was always curious about data you get from sensors. Let's say if computer is measuring or sensors are measuring something and providing to you, I'm always interested. But that's the end of my interest. I'm not going further into the science.
Okay. Yeah.
It takes too much time. It takes too much time, and I don't have patience to do it.
Yeah, it's a kind of humble process, I guess. Yeah, but does that answer your question a bit? Yes. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about your non-machines headquarters. Like, what kinds of artists are working there? Is it like open for everyone, kind of? And also with the jellyfish, are you making like the data they output open source, or are you thinking about it? And also, have you thought about making it available also for scientists to make it interdisciplinary space?
Yeah, it is, as I write it here, maybe I didn't say that, but it's for friends, for artists, for researchers, for everyone. So, yeah, so it is open for anyone. Also for friends, whoever wants to go and do some kind of research. Yeah. And the jellyfish on the website, if you go, yeah, there's a database of all the photos. I deleted now a lot before coming in here because there were too many photos. And I just wanted to select photos to show you different ones, to start thinking what they do the machines, what kind of photos they do. But yeah, the database is accessible, and it's possible to see through a website, and I still develop this project, so I don't know what will be the next step. So maybe I want to integrate like cell networks with SIM cards, so I could release the jellyfishes into the real oceans, and so they don't function just only with Wi-Fi or with a cell phone nearby, so they would be floating all around. But the database is there, accessible, yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. If there are no, I will ask one myself. Okay, Ian, you told me previously that you are recently diving more into the philosophical aspect of your work. I have a personal question. The scientific method is a very straightforward method, like you know what you want and you know how to get it. And the thing with philosophy is that you can get floating somehow. How do you keep the balance between these two?
Yeah, so I guess maybe from my scientific background, I'm still very much, I guess, problem focused or kind of issue focused. So maybe I have some kind of inherent, motivation to be doing things that are somehow meaningful. But I don't know. I mean, that's just a personal definition. But then, I think that projects me into kind of spaces where it's not just about doing something in isolation. So why am I not just happy kind of doing just straight science in the lab? And I've felt the need to expand it because I think we really have to consider science and the work it is in terms of what I talked about, but also the outcome of it in terms of what potential impacts there are. And this is where I think transdisciplinarity makes a big point, in that if you have some kind of personal expertise and some kind of personal work, that can have many, many connections and implications from other fields and other points of view that you're not aware of because of just your individual point of view. And so, some outcome of your work is valuable to someone else. So, from another epistemological background. And then I think that is just trying to think about what are the potential impact ideas of my work, technological applications and knowledge transfer. Sure, there's a classical in a scientific sense, but really also what does the model that I'm using scientifically here imply about the world? And then what do the results of my experiments imply about that model, imply about the world? That's when it gets kind of philosophical as well. So it started really with, okay, the data I'm recording in the brain, why isn't it weird that I don't see constant data about the position of the body, but only when the body changes? And then it becomes, what does that imply about this and that and that and that? That's the philosophical process. So I would encourage everyone, and I tell this to all my scientific colleagues, stop thinking inside of your kind of box where you are just thinking about what the outcome of your work is within your own field, and try to be really open to what the outcome is in any field, in any perspective.
Okay, thank you all. We've now officially reached the end of today's session, but fortunately you can join us once again next week on the 28th of November. We would warmly like to thank all listeners here and online in the stream, and especially today's guests, Ian and Mindaugas. Next week we will be having a discussion with Helen Ulas and Professor Arno Duque-Jordan, who will together reflect on computational systems in artistic and ecological environments. Last but not least, we'd also like to thank the team for making this possible, from streaming to setup and organization. A warm thank you to you all backstage. Now, we would like to invite you all to continue the conversation at the bar. Thank you for coming, and hopefully see you next week.